Are ahead of us with great faith in the American people. I accept your nomination for President of the United States.
Good morning.
Thank you.
It's official. Senator John Kerry is the Democratic Party's nominee for president. And with just 95 days to go until Election Day, he's hitting the road and heading into the American heartland today, Friday, July 30th, 2004.
From NBC News, this is a special edition of Today with Katie Couric and Matt Lauer.
And welcome to a special split edition of Today on this Friday morning. I'm Katie Couric in Boston.
And I'm Matt Lauer in New York. Probably a little bleary-eyed this morning. Katie, did you stay up to the end of the speech?
Yeah, you know, I actually went to the Fleet Center because I wanted to witness this acceptance speech firsthand. And first of all, the Fleet Center looks very different at night than it does when we were broadcasting in the morning. Matt, it was jam-packed. So, yes, it was a bit of a late night, but I was glad to actually be there and watch the speech instead of watching it on television for a change.
And what's with the new location? I see grass behind you for a change.
That's right. I'm in Boston's Langone Park, Matt, because it's the site of a send-off rally that will be held this morning for the newly minted Democratic nominees, John Kerry and John Edwards. They're off today on a 3,500-mile coast-to-coast swing through a total of 21 states in all, starting with the battlegrounds of Pennsylvania and Ohio. Of course, the big question this morning, did John Kerry somehow convince the American public last night he deserves to be president of the United States? In just a few minutes, we're going to check in with Tim Russert, Tom Brokaw, as well as the chair of the Democratic Convention, New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson. We'll also find out what President Bush is doing now to regain the spotlight. Matt?
All right, Katie, thanks. Also ahead, you remember that disturbing video that we showed you earlier this week? A 3-year-old boy from Virginia playing with a gun while his parents took target practice and drank beer. It's chilling for any parent to watch. Well, this morning in an exclusive interview, the boy's parents will be here to tell us their side of the story. Also ahead, important health news about breast cancer and whether MRIs are better at detecting it than mammograms. Plus, we're going to talk to a Texas woman who survived a frightening shark attack off the coast. And on a much lighter note, the excitement's building. Singing sensation Norah Jones will perform live on the concert stage in our 8:30 half hour, Katie.
All right, Matt, but first, John Kerry's speech to the nation. Many were calling it the most important speech of his political career. NBC's Campbell Brown is standing by with more on that. Campbell, good morning.
Good morning, Katie. People are slowly starting to gather here to give John Kerry and John Edwards a send-off. As you mentioned, last night may well have been the most important speech he's ever given. John Kerry spoke to thousands of delegates, millions in the primetime audience, reintroducing himself in a sense to the American people, with strength seeming to be the most important thing he wanted to convey.
Wading across the convention floor, John Kerry walked onto center stage and took the reins of the Democratic Party.
I'm John Kerry, and I'm reporting for duty.
In just under 46 minutes, the former junior officer made the case he is strong and ready to assume command.
I defended this country as a young man, and I will defend it as president.
He forcefully challenged President Bush over the war in Iraq.
Saying there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq doesn't make it so. Saying we can fight a war on the cheap doesn't make it so. And proclaiming mission accomplished certainly doesn't make it so.
And his criticism of the Bush administration more generally was clear.
I will have a vice president who will not conduct secret meetings with polluters to rewrite our environmental laws. I will have a Secretary of Defense who will listen to the advice of the military leaders, and I will appoint an Attorney General who will uphold the Constitution of the United States.
He also directed his message at working families, insisting the economy needs a boost and that the Bush administration does not own the debate over values.
Values are not just words. Values are what we live by. They're about the causes that we champion and the people that we fight for. And it's time for those who talk about family values to start valuing families.
The evening ended with 100,000 balloons and confetti, slightly delayed to the annoyance of Kerry aides, leading Democrats and the party faithful enthusiastically behind their man.
Today, Kerry and Edwards kick off their first campaign trip as the official Democratic nominees, beginning a 2-week bus tour through 21 states, focusing on key battlegrounds. Their first stop today, Scranton, Pennsylvania. Katie?
All right, Campbell Brown. Campbell, thank you so much for that report. And now let's head back to New York, where Ann Curry has the rest of the morning's top stories. Ann, good morning.
Good morning to you, Katie. Good morning, everybody. Also in the news this morning, now that the Democratic convention is over, President Bush will try to recapture the political spotlight. He returned to the White House last night, and today he's heading for Missouri, Michigan, and Ohio, 3 of the most fiercely contested battleground states. A senior White House official says the president is in the process, meantime, of preparing a series of directives to implement the recommendations of the 9/11 Commission. Today, the Senate opens hearings on those recommendations. Among those testifying, Chairman Tom Kaine and Vice Chairman Lee Hamilton. Secretary of State Colin Powell made an unannounced visit to Baghdad this morning. Powell is the highest-ranking U.S. official to go to Iraq since the interim government took over a month ago. Today in Colorado, another pretrial hearing in the Kobe Bryant case. Defense attorneys are now suggesting greed is a motive of Bryant's accuser. NBC's Mark Mullen is more now from Eagle, Colorado. Mark, good morning.
And good morning to you. The defense has tried to reveal a lot about the accuser and her alleged motives, including her mental health and her sexual history. Now, $20,000 they say that she took for mental health benefits and lost wages.
Kobe Bryant's lawyers say money his accuser got from a victim's fund is a motive in accusing him of rape. Defense lawyer Pamela Mackey said, quote, "The accuser has profited an enormous amount, $20,000, and she has done that on the basis of a false allegation." A former Colorado prosecutor disagrees with that defense tactic.
I don't think that people would buy the idea that for $20,000 a person would continue.
NBC's Mark Mullen. Thank you, Mark, this morning. Damage estimates are in the millions from flooding in North Texas. At least 3 deaths are being blamed on heavy rains over the last 2 days, including a man whose vehicle was swept away when a bridge collapsed. Forecasters expect more rain today in parts of South Carolina. 5 inches of rain Thursday caused flooding and some evacuations there. You're now up to date at 7:08. Let's now go back to Matt and Al this morning.
Al's looking not only at that storm in South Carolina, but further off the coast in the Bahamas.
That's right, the Bahamas and the Gulf Coast. We've got a couple of areas of tropical disturbances to take a look at. You can see 2 areas, one in the southeast Gulf of Mexico, the other one the northwest of Bahamas. A tropical depression may form in either one of those, and one of them may affect the east coast later on early next week. Severe storms later today, western Great Lakes into northern Texas. Sunshine and cooler temperatures out west. We're looking for some severe storms in the upper Ohio River Valley. That's what's going on around the country. Here's what's happening in your neck of the woods.
Good morning, everybody. I'm meteorologist Art Horn. Let's take a look at the current temperatures. Pretty nice out there this morning. 60, that's all in Willimantic, 63 in New Haven, 66 in New London, and 65 in Hartford. Our satellite viewpoint shows no action anywhere near the area. A little zoom back shows it even farther out. Just some high, thin clouds moving in from the west. So for today over inland areas, mostly sunny, warm, and increasingly humid, highs 82 to 87. And on the shore, a nice day, mostly sunny, higher humidity, 77 to 82.
Now back to Boston and Katie.
All right, Al. On Close Up this morning, the party's over. The Democratic National Convention wrapped up here in Boston last night. The big question, how did John Kerry do? For that, we turn to NBC's Tim Russer, moderator of Meet the Press and Washington Bureau Chief. Hi, Tim.
Hi, Katie.
All right, yesterday we talked about what John Kerry needed to do. He needed to be perceived and as more human or humanize himself and offer voters real specifics. How did he do on each front?
Clearly, Katie, he gave of himself last night, where he came from, who he was, and I think quite successfully. On specificity, it was a very good first step in terms of economic populism, tax cuts, health care, defense, running to the right of George Bush in terms of increasing the size of the military. I think overall, Democrats and Republicans I talked to said that John Kerry showed last night he had the passion and toughness to be a very formidable candidate this fall.
An interesting thing in his speech, which you and I had discussed, is that he took on some issues head on that heretofore some Democrats have rolled over about. In other words, he said when he talked about patriotism and the American flag, when he talked about faith, when he talked about values, those are traditionally Republican issues that the Republicans have co-opted, if you will, and sort of taken as their own. But he said, not so fast.
When he stood up and said, John Kerry reporting for duty, you could feel the whole room say yes, because they realized that in post-September 11th world, the Democrats cannot yield on the issue of defense or terrorism or values. They have to be embraced and articulated and fought from different perspectives. And I think that John Kerry laid that out last night. He basically drew the line and said to George Bush, I'm going to fight you about values. I'm going to fight you about defense. I'm going to fight you about your view on how to execute the war on terrorism. And that's going to make for a very good campaign, because there are big differences on big issues between these candidates.
Was he singing to the choir? Was this mostly for the base, because to galvanize the base, or was he speaking directly to some of these undecided voters in these key swing states?
He had to do both. He was underperforming with some key Democratic constituencies. George Bush has 90% of the Republicans in his corner. John Kerry had to get 90% of the Democrats in his corner and then go for those independent votes. And so in terms of going after Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld and John Ashcroft, that was red meat for the base. But in terms of talking about health care, in terms of talking about repealing the tax cut on the top $200,000 income earners in order to spend it on education and other programs, that was a direct attempt to go after those swing voters, particularly women. And that's why John Kerry showcased the importance of his mother and his life. He had his two daughters introduce him. There was a real emphasis on trying to broadening that gender gap, because if the Democrats can get women, blacks, and Hispanics to turn out at the same levels they did in 2000, John Kerry can win the popular vote by 3 million votes, according to George Bush campaign.
Did you hear anything that really stood out about either Iraq or the economy, which frankly were the cornerstones of the speech?
No. The problem that John Kerry has on Iraq, and the Republicans were quick to point this out last night, is that they will call it his Achilles heel. They say, George Bush says we were right about Iraq back then, and we're right about it now. John Kerry voted for the war, against the money to keep it going. Where does he stand?
But he did say, people criticize me because I see the complexities and issues. That was a way of saying things. In fact, I think he said, not everything is black and white or crystal clear. And that was a direct response to those votes about Iraq, don't you think?
Yeah, and he also said the only way we're going to solve the situation in Iraq is by changing leadership, one where other countries in the world would want to cooperate. It's his best answer. I happen to think that, Katie, no matter what either of the candidates say about Iraq, what happens on the ground is important. If it's unstable and anxious the way it is now, it's going to be very difficult for George Bush. If it's more democratic and peaceful, it's obviously a big plus for him.
Very quickly, how big a bump do you think that the Kerry Edwards ticket will get? Well, let's remind viewers that Clinton got a 16-point bump, Dukakis 17-point, Gore 8-point. Are expectations lower than that?
They have to be, because the bases now are so secure and strong. My sense is that by the weekend or early next week, we'll see John Kerry up 4 or 5 points going into the Olympics. But then the Republicans have their convention. And after Labor Day, I think this race will be dead even.
All right, Tim Russer. Tim, thanks for your insight and your help all week long, and the fact that you got little if no sleep.
Great to be with you.
Thanks, Tim. All right, so how are Democratic operatives feeling about the convention? New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson chaired this Democratic convention here in Boston. Governor, good morning. Thanks for being here. What do you think John Kerry accomplished last night?
Well, it was a home run in terms of the speech. The best speech that he's ever given, one of the best nominating speeches ever. He did what we wanted him to do. Humanize himself, establish himself as a leader, a national security leader who can talk about values as a person, connecting with people, energizing the Democratic base, which is so important. Also reaching out to maybe that 10-15% of undecided voters that want to see positive solutions, that want to see what John Kerry is going to do about education and healthcare and jobs and national security and homeland security. So he achieved what we wanted, which was to connect them with voters on a personal level. I think his Vietnam War service transcends so many issues. The fact that he's a veteran, he's been in combat, and now the Republicans can't say that we are weak on national security, that we're weak in defense, when you've got all these generals and his swift both crewmates out there and Literally, Senator Kerry pulls somebody out of the Mekong Delta and saves them.
It was interesting, though, that we heard more about Vietnam this week than Iraq.
Well, that defense issue, national security issue, has been a problem for Democrats over the year. Voters perceive us, I think unfairly, that we're not as strong as the Republicans on national security, and that I think Senator Kerry dispelled that. The fact that he's got 20 years on the Foreign Relations Committee, the fact that he's experienced, the fact that he's served in Vietnam, he served in combat. And I believe that issue is no longer going to be ceded to the Republicans. And for those independent voters that haven't made up their mind, it gives them a comfort level. And now we go into the battleground states. We got to keep the momentum of this convention going. For an entire month, he's going to go to over 22 cities and communities with Senator Edwards, including my state of New Mexico.
Which Al Gore won by 366 votes last time, so...
It's going to be very close in New Mexico, too. But 4 years ago, Al Gore didn't have a Democratic governor, which Senator Kerry has now. And so we expect a very tight race, but this convention gave us everything we wanted.
Did you speak with Senator Kerry last night following his speech?
Yes, I did.
How was he feeling?
He was really up. He was excited. He was turned on. He said, "How did I do?" I said, "Great." And I could see this smile, and he knew he had done well. I think the moment he started, when he saluted and said, "Reporting to duty," that just transcended everything.
The Republicans have already said he didn't spend enough time talking about what they term the most liberal voting record in the Senate. And when it comes to all these programs, how are you going to pay for them?
They're so negative. They have nothing to run on, so they're trying to turn an excellent campaign appearance, a great convention, into negativism. They want to talk about wedge issues. They want to talk about issues that have same-sex marriage that are irrelevant. Senator Kerry talked about jobs, about education, about protecting the homeland, about humanity, compassion, about senior citizens, about single moms, and the Republicans just have their attack machine. We've been positive in our convention. We have a vision for the country. Senator Kerry has that. And the Republicans, the same tired stuff that just isn't going to work.
Governor Bill Richardson, I'm not sure they'd agree. You've been totally positive during this convention, but thanks for
we've been
joining
very
us.
positive.
That's the party line. Governor Richardson, thanks very much. And now let's go back to Matt in New York.
All right, Katie, thanks. Now to the latest on the Kobe Bryant case and the new questions about why Bryant's accuser received nearly
targets Al-Qaeda might be planning to attack. Financial companies in New York